Hey everyone, welcome back to Lens Flare, the podcast where we talk about kind of everything related to starting a photography business, starting in the modeling business, and a lot of the hurdles that people encounter and hopefully overcome in the beginning of your career.
Welcome, welcome. So today we have a guest.
Me. I usually go by Storm most of the time on all the social media things. Kayla, pretty much anything works. But yeah, I've been working with Ignis Umbra for a very long time now, and I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome.
I'm excited you're here too.
Yee.
All right, so today we are going to talk about, well, our first attempt at bedroom boudoir.
Yeah, I feel like the closest to real boudoir, like the traditional, granted it's cosplay themed, but the traditional, like in the bedroom, soft shadows and very classic boudoir poses for sure.
Do we want to show examples while we talk about it?
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right. So this is Kayla, and she was doing a Zelda boudoir, and and go for it.
Yeah, so Zelda is my favorite character pretty much from childhood. The Legend of Zelda series really means a lot to me. And so when we started out, we were kind of entering this venture, right, of working on photography, doing cosplay and a little bit of lewd and a little bit of kind of just leaning towards almost boudoir, but really more focusing on, okay, you know, we have these people coming in and we want to create content of our own and also share content that they can profit on, I guess, that they can also utilize for their socials and hopefully benefit from. And so we had done some different things, Pokemon and the Zatanna shoot, where a lot of it was, yes, we have costumes, but we're also losing pieces of costumes or changing costumes. And so I was like, well, I love Zelda and we needed content. And I was like, I want to do a boudoir shoot as Zelda. So let's, you know, explore this idea of like, oh, it's Princess Zelda, but also, you know, maybe she's like waiting for Link to come home. Like just this idea of like a almost modern day Zelda kind of waiting around for her boyfriend. And so I just like kind of came up with this whole concept and I was like, you guys are the only ones that I know that I would trust currently to do this type of shoot. And we both win because then you guys have stuff and I have stuff for social media and for myself. So the project was born pretty much from that. And these images are just like so much fun. I feel like they really meet that whimsical side of like, you have the elf ears, right? They're very prominent. They stick out quite a bit. So you definitely can see, yeah, this is an elf girl. And then we have like the poster in the back that you made, Ridge.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so you can just make out the Triforce in that poster. And then I also on the undergarment, on the underwear, there was the Hylian crest. So you have these really cool kind of nods.
Your earrings too.
Right. And the Triforce earrings. I actually forgot that I was wearing
earrings.
those. So you have these little nods to the character where it's maybe at first glance you wouldn't necessarily guess, oh, this is Zelda. But if you look at it and you're a fan of the franchise, you're going to know who the character is.
At one point you were actually playing Legend of
Yes.
Zelda.
Yeah, I brought the Switch. I really wanted to nod into like the nerdiness. I love like being a gamer. It's such a huge part of who I am. So it was really cool to be able to incorporate that. And, you know, we had talked about that beforehand and I was like, I just want a few pictures where like I have this. I also brought my ocarina. So I had the blue like Ocarina of Time. We did a couple photos with that turned out kind of cool too. I brought a little goddess statue, which you can just barely see the wings of, but it's that prayer picture. And So, Zelda
Which
praying
is actually,
to...
I think this is one of our most popular images at conventions and things.
It's my favorite from that whole set. I think that it turned out great. And it just gives that feel. Because if you know the Zelda franchise, she's very like, whenever she's an adult, she's either kind of praying to the goddess Hylia or just trying to figure out who she is, what her powers are, what role she plays in kind of saving Hyrule. And so it's fun. It's fun to incorporate things like that into a shoot like this, where, yes, like if you took away the elf ears, you could probably still absolutely have this exact shot and it would look great. You don't have to have like the fantastical element to it, but having it adds into the character. So it's very fun. It made for a really fantastic shot. I love that shot.
One of the things I think is interesting about this shoot, it was our first shoot where the model, you, contributed to the photo shoot ahead of time. Because before, we were just bringing in people and giving them costumes. Like we came up with the things. And I think it just works out so much better when it's something you're passionate about and something that you have ideas of like, oh, you want to make sure you get these images and we have images we want to get, and you combine them and you create something unique that's not just something cookie cutter that we saw online somewhere. Like it was actually a cool blending.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just love that it was tailored to you because you were, you liked it so much, and then you brought all the things, and we didn't have to worry about, does it fit, or will this color scheme work for you, or
Right.
or how would you be in this wig? Because sometimes you get a brand new wig and you're like, oh no, I don't like that cut.
Right. And sometimes like the color doesn't really work right. You may get a wig in, especially if you order wigs online. It's very kind of risky if you don't have it already in your possession and like, yes, this works with my skin tone, or it's the right color that I want to show up on film. Especially with blonde wigs, there's such a spectrum of blonde wigs, and they run the range from all kinds of different shades and tones and colors. So a lot of times with blonde, they end up being very yellow. So if you get in a wig you just ordered online, for somebody else, and then they come in and they try it on, there's always that risk where it's like, oh, this isn't really the right color. It doesn't quite work. So then you kind of have to be like, all right, well, these are what we have, or do we just go with the model's natural hair? My natural hair is relatively close to the color of this wig, but it's not nearly as long. And I already had owned this wig, so I knew that the color itself would work. So yeah, absolutely. Having your own stuff and not having to worry about, all right, we just got these things in and we're going to hopefully get them to work with this specific model off of the measurements that they gave. It definitely benefits the shoot.
And I think on those same notes, having a model who comes and they say, hey, I really want to do this shoot, I have this new outfit and things, they still need to put it on at home.
Yes.
Because sometimes they don't. And it's like, oh, this doesn't work. Or they're trying to like cut or trying to like come up with like a different attachment points to like try to like hack their outfit to work. They should have done that before the photo shoot.
Last minute safety pins and
Oh yeah.
it's fine for the con floor most of the time. You can kind of just make it work and walk around a convention. Most people won't even notice. But for shots like these, especially so many of them where you get really like right up there, you're very close to the model, you're going to notice these imperfections pretty quickly.
I also wanted to bring up boundaries. I feel like boundaries would be important for both sides of the spectrum, the
Absolutely.
photographer and the model.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, for me, there was a comfort level, right? I had already worked with you guys. So I knew there was like a level of trust there, because when you're doing boudoir, part of what comes with that is taking off clothes. And generally speaking. And so to know what level you're comfortable at on the model side is really important to let your photographer know when you are getting ready to do a shoot like this. Because if they don't know, oh, I'm totally not comfortable going topless, they're maybe going to assume, okay, well, we're doing full boudoir, so I have these ideas, and several of them involve, no shirt and maybe just some hand placement or whatever, because there are a lot of poses in boudoir and glamour and all of this type of photography where you're not necessarily exposing yourself, but you're relying on things like your arms in the prayer shot to cover like sensitive areas, some areas that people may not be comfortable, even with just their photographers, even though it's going to be covered in the picture, they may not want to be in a room with no top on at all. But if you're not comfortable with that, just let your photographer know, because most of the time they can just work around that. They will find a way to make sure that you're comfortable and you get what you want out of the shoot.
On the photographer side, it's, number one, I have to assume that if you're a photographer getting into boudoir, that that, especially if you're a guy, you're probably going to have to be more restrained in your looks, in your comments, everything, because you have to build up this trust that you're here to make art and you want to make them look amazing and you want to respect their boundaries, so that if, like, I would say half the models that we work with don't want to show their nipples. And then half of those models don't want to be topless in the room with us at all. They just don't want to. So you have to like really give them the feeling that that's okay. Because I've had a lot of cases where the models, before they even show up, feel like they're pressuring themselves that they're going to have to take off the rest of their clothes. Mm-hmm. And I can completely make a boudoir shoot work with no clothes. Well, not no clothes coming off, but very little clothes coming off.
Right.
And so you have to not just understand their boundaries, but you have to really sometimes make them feel comfortable. There was a time where a model was like, "Oh, I will take my clothes off if you want." And I'm like, "But you don't want to." "Yeah, but I would do it for you." "But you don't want to. And if you don't want to, then don't. Like, I don't need it for the shot." And she like really struggled because she's trying to people please. And that's I think that's a danger just in general, mm-hmm. is that women will often try to people please because they're socialized to people please. And so as a guy, you have to talk through those boundaries. What do you want? And then make sure they're not going against their own things, because they'll regret it afterwards anyway. So you just like, mm-hmm. you have to encourage them to listen to their own internal clock or their internal compass.
And I mean, that's fair, because we don't need them to be naked. And there are plenty of other girls, women, even guys that are willing to go nude. So, I mean, do whatever you're comfortable with.
I think it's funny because the way you said it, like even guys, and like a lot of people would assume that guys are more willing to be nude. Not in my experience.
No.
Not in my experience at all.
Not in front of a camera.
Not in front of the camera.
No.
That's the big thing, right? Like a lot of guys, I think people get this idea because guys are often in public willing to put on this front of like, oh yeah, I totally cool with like everyone seeing my body. Like my body parts are great. But when you get them behind a camera and it's something where it's like, this is a photo and photos, last forever. Mm-hmm. It definitely creates a level of discomfort. So there are definitely men who absolutely do not want to take all their clothes off in front of a camera, almost more so than women. And that's not to say there are not lots of women who don't want to take their clothes off, because a lot of us don't. A lot of people really don't want to be naked in photos, and that's fine as long as you're honest with yourself about that and you keep to your own set kind of convictions, the things that you said from the get-go, like, I am not comfortable doing this. Don't force yourself then to try and do that if that's not what you wanted in the first place.
I also feel like the best time to talk about boundaries is when we are giving them their release forms. So it's just like, here are all the things and the rules and the signage.
And we talked about release forms a little bit in the previous episode where we talked about TFP trade, and I think a lot of boudoir people do trade in the beginning of their careers. We're not going to go into it. We're going to have a whole episode just about contracts, but by all means, tell the model that you need them to sign a release form before they show up, and preferably give them a copy of the release form before they show up. It's just, I've learned this lesson myself multiple times. You want to get it out of the way. Many models will say they're not going to sign anything. That's fine. You can, reschedule with a different model, and the model can reschedule with a different photographer, and it all works out because you didn't waste each other's time.
The other thing is, when we were talking about this photo shoot, we loved the overall general flow of it. So most girls come in and they're like, oh, we're going to do boudoir. So we brought 15 outfits. Why do you need 15 outfits?
I think people get excited, right? They commit and they're like, I want to do this thing. I think this is a really cool thing. It's exciting. And I really want to get these photos, whether it's for themselves or their partner, or, if they want it for social media, because that's become such a big thing now, is to share photos like that in social media circumstances. And so they get excited and they're like, well, I think that this would look good, and this would look good, and this would look good. So they just bring everything. But honestly, it just creates more complication to bring more things and expect more things with different outfits, as opposed to trying to keep it much more simple. And with this shoot, I really had very specific items in mind, particularly because I only have so many kind of undergarments, right, and pajamas that have that Legend of Zelda theme. So I was really trying to stick, for me, to that theme. And so it made everything super simple, because it was like, all right, we're going to start with the pajama set, and then we're going to start slowly removing things until we are at the point where you're comfortable. And that just makes for a very easy flow for, I think, everybody.
Yeah, that's it's so funny, because literally when we were preparing for this episode before you arrived, I was telling Kat how much I want to do another shoot like this, because so few have gone as smooth and have given it such great results as this shoot. And it's all about this progression, generally starting from more clothes to less, but not necessarily too many different clothes. It's fine to switch out to a boyfriend shirt or something like that, or a robe, because you actually go from pajama set to progressively less clothes. And at one point you add a robe. You didn't have the robe originally.
I forgot about that. That was something that we had just as like an extra piece for something else. And yeah, we went ahead and added the robe. I feel like we were doing so well, and it was to the point where it was like, all right, we only have this many things left to do. Do we want to add a robe? And a robe is relatively simple, right? Because you don't have to take anything off to add a robe. You don't have to completely change an outfit to throw on something that just sits over the top.
That's where the robe in the boyfriend shirts, these are just, they're accessories. They're not an outfit themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing is we get really sad when we did a photo shoot and one of our girls had a corset on, and she was progressively, taking things off. And so we went to take the photos, and you could see the lines on where the steel was. And
that provokes like a comment that a girl rarely hears. Put them back on. Put the clothes back on, please.
Yeah, so you get these very unnatural lines on your skin, because corsets are very restricting. They're made to sit very tight on your skin. Most people don't wear something underneath, especially for a shoot like this. A lot of times it's like, okay, I'm going to wear a bra and the corset. But when you remove the corset, you are left with, because it's tightened onto your body, you're left with the lines from the boning, from the steel or plastic, whatever it is, the boning from the corset. And the lines don't translate well into photographs like ever, unless that's what you're going for. It just doesn't wind up looking good because it takes away from the person.
Now, a lot of girls, and I think even now starting some guys too, they're starting to rely on binding wear, Spanx, corsets, things like that, because society makes them uncomfortable about their stomach. And so because they're so reliant, the idea of doing a shoot without something to help them to hold their stomach, smaller, tighter, they just can't stand it. But then ultimately they don't get a good shoot. They don't get good photos out of it. Whereas we've shot with people that are quite curvy, and they're very beautiful images, and they weren't wearing corsets. You don't need corsets, because that's part of the like magic of boudoir, is the angles and the shadows and the lighting
And the softness.
and the softness. And it's like it's an art form made to help. I don't know to help, but it's made for women to like love their bodies and love themselves.
Absolutely, to love themselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that I just wanted to kind of make a point to anybody who wants to get into boudoir as like on the model side. And that was just to not hide yourself because of insecurities that you have about your body or anything, because we all have them, right? So I have my insecurities about different things. I think that it's fair to say literally anyone, from someone that you might consider to be like the perfect body, all the way to someone that you might consider to be absolutely, you never want to look like that ever. We all have these kind of like negative thoughts about different things about ourselves, right? So kind of need to try your best to like ignore that, throw that away, just let it live. It's still going to be there. It's not going to go anywhere, but let yourself get past that, because in the end, while you're doing these photo shoots, if you're uncomfortable with something like your stomach, which is very, very common, the posing and the angles of the camera can completely hide that. It makes it almost entirely vanish. So you will not necessarily see that same imperfection, and you'll still get a photo that's you without having to corset or cinch up or use any of these aids that we were talking about, things like Spanx, where a lot of us have kind of started to rely on things to give us a shape that we think is most kind of looked at by society as this is the picture of perfection. And you don't need that. You should be happy getting these photos because they're of you, but they can still be incredible photos of you without needing to worry about the things that you're very self-conscious over.
And they're you, not necessarily, they don't have to be liquefied. They don't have to be, like a filter that turn you into a cartoon. I love those things too. They're fun.
Yeah.
I am adorable as a cartoon.
Dude, my eyes are humongous.
Oh, I got big lips too. I'm like, where did those come from?
But it's fun and satisfying, and I think healthy to see yourself and be like, that's me. And a lot of times people say like, I can't even really believe it's me, but it's them. And that's what boudoir is great for. So I really like that we went in this direction. We talked a little bit before the show about the direction we went, as we like in the beginning, just kind of like making up things kind of off the top of our head or whatever. Like, oh, we want to do this thing we want it to be kind of sexy. We want to do cosplay or whatever. And I just from the photographer perspective, I think it's very worthwhile to study other people and other art forms and learn those things, because I know we all kind of, especially as artists, we want to be unique and different and individual, but I think it's good to learn and get good at other art forms before twisting it and making it our own. And I think this is like we made it our own. This is like we learned from, there's a boudoir person out there, Michael Sasser. He does a lot of great training videos about boudoir. And these poses are definitely inspired from his poses. But he doesn't do anything with cosplay or anything like that. And even just like the praying to the goddess statue, like he doesn't do anything like that because it wouldn't make any sense. His models aren't princesses from a fantasy world.
Right.
So it's okay to learn from other people and get inspired from other art forms before trying to make your own art form. It's not going to hold you back, and you're not just copying. I mean, unless you are copying, and then maybe I don't know. That's the thing too. Some people are happy copying or feeling like I want to do that, and some people feel complimented. I feel complimented. If you want to copy one of our photo shoots, like I would probably feel complimented. I wouldn't feel upset about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially, even talking more on posing, right? We used so many of his videos, well, one in particular, to really like help us figure out how to help people pose, how to help me pose while I'm doing stuff, and things that are happening during the pose that make specific features stand out. And I think that the more you study those things and the more you practice those things, the more you start to pick up on that. And so even outside of, yes, I really like this specific pose and I want to exactly duplicate and mimic this pose because I really like it, that's fine. But you may also start to realize like, okay, well, I can take this same pose and just do a little bit of a different angle or put it in a different place. And I'm still going to get that because I understand, this is happening with the body here, which is very nice looking on the camera. And so you're really, even by mimicking, you are learning these things, and it helps you in the long run.
That I think the more that you practice the poses as a model, it's obviously a skill. It's obviously a skill. It's something you get better at. And people are always complimenting you, rightfully so. They're always saying that like, oh, you're so good at posing. It doesn't just happen. You're not just born doing this stuff. And I think that people who practice selfies and looking in the mirror, I get that it might feel narcissistic or whatever, and some people complain. But personally, when I see that, I'm like, oh, I probably want to work with that person because that means they know what their face looks like. And a lot of people don't.
Oh, I don't know what my face looks like. I look like an angry person. I have resting
RBF.
Yep. I'm like, ooh, what was I thinking there?
Yep.
I don't like it.
But you're absolutely right. There have been several photo shoots where I've been there even just to help other people pose. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're so good at this. And it's like, well, kind of. Mostly it's just because I do this over and over again. And because I've been in so many photo shoots, taken so many photos with photographers and of myself just doing different things, you start to realize your own actions and how that translates into the camera. So from the model side, practicing things like you were saying, you may wind up doing a similar move very frequently. There's one, I almost always wind up like, it's like touching my face or something. And for whatever reason, I always do it like at least once at some point during like close up photos. And it always looks good every single time because I know when I do that and I'm angling my face a certain way and like moving my hands around, that it's going to look a certain way in the camera. So it just works. It works. And the more that you practice that, the more that you do, the more you're going to realize things like that. And you may even start to subconsciously then reuse similar types of poses or move your face a certain way because you're so used to, yes, I like how that looked and felt with the photos that I ended up with, that you end up with even more pictures that you love how they turned out. So it's a good idea to do.
So I think at this point, this is where we usually end the podcast. I do want to emphasize, be be yourself, love yourself, and do boudoir, because I think boudoir is great, and I think boudoir is great for men, women, couples. I think it's all fun, and I think it can really, with a good boudoir photographer, I think it can really make you feel good about yourself. So I'm by all means. And at this point, we typically move the conversation over to the bonus cast. So this is Kayla's first time joining us over there, even though she's actually the one who posts over on our Patreon and everything. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, join us over there. And if you're not, consider going over there and becoming a Patreon subscriber and seeing more of all these photos and behind the scenes and, of course, the bonus cast.
The bonus cast. All right. Thank you guys for
Thank you.
listening to us, and join us for the bonus cast. Bye.
Bye.